Oh, Queen Justice, where are you? Did they beat you up or no? Lock you on the ground, take the crown away from you?
Oh, Lady Liberty, red, white, and blue. Did they take your dignity with their bigotry? Teach you that you're born to lose.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you break.
We've had enough
of all the money you make.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.
It's been 400 years and we're 400 late. Together we stand from state to state. Going back in time won't make America great. We need justice now, people won't wait.
Action, no more distraction. Every step we take, we gain traction. If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. United we stand, divided we fall. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you were breaking.
We've had enough
of all the money you were making.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. You better believe, just roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough of all the rules you're breaking. We've had enough all the money you're making. We've had enough. No more life gets taken. We've had enough. This is the proclamation.
We've had enough. Trayvon Martin and Tommy Rice.
We've had enough.
Michael Brown and Eric gonna pay the price.
We've had enough.
Philando, Breonna, George Floyd.
What? We've had enough.
So many gone, how can we fill the void?
How can we feel?
We had enough. John Crawford, I know you've heard.
We've had enough.
Sandra Bland, come on and take a stand.
We've had enough.
Sean Bell, what the hell?
We've had enough.
Freddie Gray, did you hear what I said?
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.
I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Starting a week that is a week of particular consequence. Minneapolis is the center of the universe right now, with the beginning days of the arguments around the trial of Derek Chauvin. I watched this morning. I'm sure the rest of the world is watching what is unfolding here in our community. Mondays, this program, we talk to people that are seeking office or seeking to be reelected to office in the city of Minneapolis. We continue with that today. We're pleased to have elected and candidates for election for city council in the city of Minneapolis. First, I want to welcome my co-host and partners in this, Diana Hawkins and Andrew from Hawthorne Neighborhood Council. Thank you guys for being here. How was your weekend, first of all? How are you, Diana and Andrew?
I'm good. My weekend was good. I'm busy. Looking forward to this conversation today, as always, though. I look forward to Monday so I can learn more about what's going on with our candidates and our potential candidates.
Andrew, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's kind of the same as Diana, a little anxious today just because of what's going on today, but I'm trying to just appreciate the beautiful weather we have and focus on that as well as other good things.
Well, I'm sharing this program to all of the pages that I'm part of, to Jamaicans around the world, to women's rights advocates in Washington, D.C., to Somali and Oromia community residents around the country, to my extended personal family, the Sykeses and the McFarlanes, because people are interested in what's happening in Minneapolis. And I say that even as we speak about the affairs of the different wards of the city of Minneapolis, what you bring in awareness, consciousness, and intent and encouragement to the citizens of our community, I believe, is of global importance and of global interest. So today, what I want to do is sort of heads up to all the people on the call, is during the course of this hour, speak, if you would, whatever impressions you have of what we're doing, about what we're doing in Minnesota right now. I want you to speak as though you're addressing the world about what's going on with the trial of Derek Chauvin, your assessment, what it means, and what your hopes might be. That's one thing. I also want you to talk about COVID-19, the impact that it has on your ward, your neighborhood, your family. If you don't have data right now, that's okay. Feelings and impressions are important. And in the future, I'm going to ask you to be prepared to talk about the specific impact of COVID-19 and strategies to mitigate it, the adoption of the vaccine in particular, but then about the whole question of disparities in health. That's a question that has to be addressed long term, that's illuminated by the tragedy of COVID-19. So that's kind of the general background. And as always, I want each of the candidates here to make the case about what their passion is that brings them to serve our city or to seek to serve our city, elected by their neighborhoods. On the call today, so far, I see Jeremiah Ellison, who is the incumbent at Ward 5. Jeremiah, how you doing, man? Good to see you. You have to unmute.
Yes, sorry about that. It's good to see you as well, and thank you for having me on the show.
I see Elijah Norris. Elijah Norris is a candidate for your seat. Elijah, good to see you. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. Thanks for the invite.
I see my friend Victor Martinez. Victor, also a neighbor and friend, candidate for Fifth Ward. Victor, how are you?
Hola, ¿cómo estás? Yo estoy muy bien, muy alegre de estar aquí con ustedes hoy día. Gracias.
Mil gracias, yo estoy bien y tanto me gusta cuando podremos hablar en español, por eso estamos recognizing la diversidad de nuestra comunidad. So from time to time we speak in Spanish, sometimes in English, and it's okay. We want to show that we have this rich diversity in our community. Also here from the 7th Ward is Tekken Zaya Aida. Bienvenidos, Tekken. ¿Cómo estás?
Muy gracias. I'm happy to be here. I've had a long day. I'll tell you all about that a little bit later on, but I'm excited to be a part of this conversation, specifically how you're talking about what's happening here and its global effects. So thank you.
Awesome. And Alicia Gibson is here. Alicia is running for City Council from Ward 10 in South Minneapolis. Alicia, good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see everybody. You were reminding me to share it out on my personal page too, because you're right. There are people from all over the country and the world who might be interested in today's conversation. And thank you all for speaking another language. I love that as a former international studies student and PhD in comparative literature. That's my love language, is somebody else's language.
Well, great. So let me start with Jeremiah. Jeremiah, as the incumbent here. First of all, welcome and ask you to welcome the listeners and viewers to the program, and impressions, feelings as the city and the world look at the trial of Derek Chauvin.
Yeah, again, thank you, Al, for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure. And I regret that I won't be able to stay the entire time. I've got stuff on the official side that we're working on. Some of the stuff that you guys will be discussing today is stuff that I'm working on. And so I appreciate the conversation, and I appreciate everyone here joining us. In the city of Minneapolis, we're having a conversation about how we intend to keep our neighbors safe, right? For a long time, people in Minneapolis have had to live within this paradox, right? And that paradox is the reality that a lot of people in my community, they do fear the police. And they are scared to call the police. At the same time, maybe they got their car broken into. Maybe they heard gunshots down the street the night before. And they desperately want to call for help. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And the idea that somebody would hesitate to call for help when they need it, to me is shameful. It's injustice. And it's why we're having the conversation that we're having here in Minneapolis right now, to perfect that system and to deliver justice for people and to make it so that when people are in need of help, they don't fear calling for such kind of help. In a lot of ways, that conversation's been going on in Minneapolis for decades. But this most recent iteration of this conversation has been sparked by the killing of George Floyd and by Derek Chauvin. Derek Chauvin's on trial right now. Those disparities aren't only in policing and public safety. Those disparities, as you said, have been represented in this pandemic. And not only did myself and my colleague, Councilmember Cunningham, have to fight to get more testing sites on the north side when the initial COVID testing rolled out, but we've had to fight to get more vaccine locations on the north side as well. And we're seeing those. And so even when we don't have direct purview over where those things land, we're fighting, we're advocating on behalf of the north side, and we're getting those wins. And so, for folks who might be keeping a close eye to Minneapolis, I say understand some of the history, some of the local history, but also some of the broader context, right? Everything from, the Red Summer race riots in Chicago in 1919, the Harlem riots, right? And this keeps happening all across our country. And so this discussion we're having in Minneapolis is not by any means isolated to Minneapolis. And so thank you for having me on the show. And again, I'm excited for the conversation we're going to be having.
What are you hearing about options for the trial? I hear some people saying kind of dismissive or resigned, saying we know they're not going to do anything. I hear that. Then I hear people who are saying, no, I believe in the process. And I think that we've got it right this time. And they are hopeful that, both teams will put up effective arguments, but they are expecting a conviction. What do you hear?
I think it would be ill-advised for me to, as not one of the attorneys in the room, to make a prediction about the outcome. But I can say this, I think that Mr. Blackwell is going to be a household name when this is all said and done on the prosecution side. And I think that no matter what the outcome on the civil side or the criminal side, if we think that the criminal trial and the civil settlement amounts to justice, then we're selling our community short. We've got to do a lot more than rely on positive outcomes on the criminal and civil side to achieve justice. And so I think that we were going to have to, folks, should reserve and let the trial play out. But no matter what the outcome is, whether it's the outcome you want or not, justice is going to be a lot more hard. Is going to be a lot tougher than these two instances.
Thank you, council member. Stay as long as you can, and if you have to leave, we certainly understand it. But thank you for being here. Thank you for your work. Let me turn to Victor Martinez. And Victor, before the show, I asked you to give me an update on a shooting that took place near where we live in North Minneapolis on West Broadway. I thought maybe somebody was killed, but you said no, there was an injury. Talk about that, but talk about that in the context of the question of violence and young people in Ward 5 in particular, but in our community in general. The question of gun violence and how do we as a community and society address that?
Absolutely. I think that I'll just kind of say what happened yesterday. It sounds like there was two young men that got shot. One was in critical condition and he became stable in the evening. And another young man, I believe he got a bullet on him. 16-year-old was the one that got in serious condition. And so for me, it continues to focus on young people. Like we have the highest concentration of people under the age of 18 on the north side, right? We also have the highest concentration of poverty. And so when you add those two things together, our young people, they feel like they have nothing else. I remember I met one kid a couple years ago. He looked like he was 16. He was offering me drugs. He's like, hey, you want some drugs? I'm like, no, man, that stuff is going to kill you. He's like, yeah, but we're all going to die sooner or later. I'm like, you want to kill yourself or let someone else kill you? And he's like, oh, that was deep. Like sometimes is that easy sometimes to speaking to our young people, and I feel like our city has ignored our young people for quite some time. Obviously the North Side has been asking for a safer community, a more prosperous community for a lot longer than I've been here, 17 years, and Al, you've been here longer than I have, and I think you could concur with that. Is like, what are the things that we're doing as a city to actually help those that we're talking about? And I agree with Jeremiah that rioting is going to keep happening. There's a lot more work to be done, but that's simply because of the hard work not being done. When they in 1967, when the riots happened here on Plymouth that destroyed our big business corridor, the community, the city, the state, the government said, "Hey, what do you guys want?" They said opportunities and jobs. And 50 years later, we're asking the same thing. So somehow, some way, our leadership is not addressing those needs for our young people in this community, and that's something that I think our city should focus a lot more on right now.
Victor, what are your thoughts about the trial, the Derek Chauvin trial? Any impressions, feelings, thoughts about what's in your mind as you watch the trial get underway today?
Yeah, I know that the last few weeks have been a little bit, frustrating because, I mean, to have the judge have to tell the city council and our city and our mayor, whoever in our city leadership, hey, stop talking about this. Like you're not helping this situation. I think a lot of people were very disappointed with the timing of this. Some that we lost. I think there was 2 jurors that were seated that were said, you know what, after that settlement, I don't think I could be impartial now, and they walked off. Like I think that for the judge to have to say that, and it's almost like it feels like a father talking to our young people. It's like, so it's a little saddening that it's chaotic and that ball continues. So I love seeing that the city's a little bit more respectful of the process. But I don't want any more pieces to be moving in a way that's going to hurt the trial on any side here.
I watched a social media show last night, 2, 3 in the morning with famous Judge Joe Brown. You guys seen him on TV, right? And he apparently is announcing that he's running for mayor of Memphis, I think. But he's always been outspoken character. One of the things I took away from his interview was he felt that even the settlement for $27 million awarded to the George Floyd family was not doing justice to that family. And he made reference, and I may be saying this wrong, so I'll use that disclaimer, to he thought a genuine or transformative settlement that could have come out of a trial might have been a settlement in the hundreds of millions or 100 million range rather than the $27 million range. What do you think about that? And that's putting you on the spot. If you have no thoughts, okay.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not in leadership right now at the city, and I don't know how money moves around. I just do worry about that. That could be the fund being taken out of other resources that we're trying to do for the city, money being taken out of our general fund that could be used for safety and other ideas that our current city council has to reimagine and do better with our police. And so I think that if you take those funds away, that you're going to cripple any real change you want to do, because when a city or any business wants to do any serious change or any serious movement, you need a large investment. And so you'd really be taking away those opportunities. That's from my outside view. Obviously, I think others that are closer could speak a little bit directly into that.
Elijah Norris, good morning. Good afternoon. How you doing?
I got no complaints, Mr. McFarlane.
Well, listen, respond to the questions I've thrown out already. One, impressions, feelings. What are your expectations, fears about what our city, our community, and the world are going through with the opening of the trial with Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd? That's number one. The second thing is how are you assembling information about the impact of COVID-19 on our families, either individually, personally with your family or friends, your network, with the constituents that you're trying to serve as you seek election in Fifth Ward? And how do you feel our community is responding to efforts to support and promote vaccination and other mitigations?
Oh, well, that's like 4 or 5 questions in one.
First, deal with the parts that you want to deal with. You're not locked into it, okay?
Yeah, there's still a lot of pain right now in our community. I talk to people on a weekly basis about what happened last year, the events that unveiled last year as a result of George Floyd's death. There are still a lot of businesses that are still hurting from COVID-19 and the riots that we experienced last year. And I'm just concerned that, there's not going to be a huge amount of investments in places like the Broadway corridor and Lake Street to fully rebuild and get them on a track to where they were and where they need to be. So that's my biggest concern. And also creating more space for our community members to be able to talk about what's been happening in our community, especially in 38th and Chicago, right? I mean, that place has experienced a lot of crime. There has been a lot of neighbors speaking out against that autonomous zone that they have there on 38th and Chicago. I'm glad that our police chief has stepped up and the mayor stepped up, and they're actually going to start doing something about what's happening in 38th and Chicago. I have friends and family members that actually live in that area, and there is a lot of gunshots going on. There is a lot of crime going on in that community, and it needs to be addressed, right? The police needs to be able to access that area, and our community members need to be able to access that area. So that's my stance on that. I also believe that the trial, I happen to agree with Victor. I think City Council made a poor decision to settle the civil aspect of the case and do the $27 million award to the family far too soon. We should have waited until after we had the jury selection solidified and we had at least the first opening arguments from the prosecution and the defense before we even decided to pursue the civil matter and to award that large of $27 million to the family of George Floyd. I think that's going to sway a lot of the jurors. As Victor noted, 2 jurors actually stepped down because they felt that they weren't going to be able to be impartial when it comes to the trial. And I think a lot of jurors also are going to be swayed by that. And I was having some conversations with some folks, and it's like, if we award people $27 million, a lot of jurors are going to think that this thing is just over with already. All right, the justice has been served. And I disagree with that. I don't think any amount of money can bring back a person's life. I don't care if it was 150 million, 200 million. George Floyd would never be able to see his daughter again. George Floyd would never be able to spend time with his family again. He would never be able to be in the community again, right? So no amount of money is going to bring a person back. But for a lot of people, $27 million is a lot of money. It's the largest settlement in Minneapolis history, right? So we have to take that in consideration. I think that the prosecution did a great job with the opening arguments this morning. We're presenting that video first to the jurors. I think that was a strong statement. For 8 minutes and 26 seconds, Derek Chauvin had his knee on George Floyd's neck as he gasped and pleaded for air. The jury needs to see that. People in Minnesota need to see that. The country needs to see that, and the world needs to see that. I think the actions of Derek Chauvin were egregious, and that he needs to go to prison for his actions. And we need to also address the bigger issue. To me, is ending qualified immunity. How can we have police accountability in our community if we still have qualified immunity on the books still existing?
Explain that.
Yeah, qualified immunity is a legal principle that grants government officials, especially police officers who are serving in their official capacity, immunity from civil cases if their actions can be justified, essentially, right? So if we end qualified immunity, we actually can hold police officers accountable personally, because with that $27 million, that didn't come out of Derek Chauvin's pocket. That came out of the taxpayers' pockets. We are going to experience the ramifications of awarding such a large settlement like that. And we can continue to experience that if we don't do something about ending qualified immunity and shifting that burden onto the police departments and the police officers who are serving in their official capacities.
Alicia Gibson, you're an attorney, I think. Am I right?
No, well, I'm a lawyer. I did
You're a
not
lawyer.
go far. I went through law school and clerked for a judge, but I think the last time I was on, I said going through that process made me have a lot of questions about our so-called justice system. And so especially what I had studied was a lot of federal Indian law. And so I ended up going back to school to think more deeply about all of these issues. But how we are going to explain this moment to the country and to the world, that was a question that kind of resonated with me when you asked it. And so I think that it's important for people to realize that in Minneapolis, we are in a moment of really vast unity around our anger and our rage and our disappointment and real sorrow over the loss of this particular individual, but the kind of larger social context of police brutality, but also, kind of racialized economic inequality, and all of it, all of the gaps. And so there's a lot of unity in the city around that. But there's also a lot of, right now, I would say there's a lot of division around what we're going to do moving forward. And I think that from my perspective, there's a lot of division because we haven't done that work of really building that consensus and taking these conversations in a really intentional, meaningful, inclusive way. And so what my campaign is calling for is to do that, is to have precinct by precinct truth and reconciliation commissions so that we have in every part of the city people who can give testimony to their individual experiences, to their generational trauma. And then we can really identify those places where we are in agreement. And maybe we come up with, instead of a one size fits all plan, maybe we come up with ideas that make sense for this community and make sense for this community. But it's something that we get people invested in from the get-go. And so I think that there's a lot of good ideas being talked about right now, but because we have not done that work that we really need to do, we're kind of mired, and it's very painful for me to watch people because I see it really breaking apart communities that should be united. It's breaking apart even the reformed communities. And so I think that is something that people around the world can really identify with, because this idea of a TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, these are things that people have used in all parts of the world to try to recover, not only to try, but to do it, to recover from really large scale collective trauma. And so that's really the perspective that I'm bringing and what I would like to bring for this campaign and as a city council member. And then I think that as a person who has gone to law school and see, maybe I know a little too well about how that sausage gets made. I don't want to be oppositional to that, because I think that there's a really important value in that process. When I've talked to people who have had, victims of violence, and they need a police officer to come, they need to evidence taken. We need to find people who are causing harm and remove them if we can't bring them back in the community. But the other thing that I would like to do is to build in an alternate pathway of justice, restorative justice. I want people in the city and in the world to know that we have a community here in Minneapolis. We have a really good restorative justice ecosystem that we can build and that we should build. And then maybe we can be leaders in creating a different kind of structure for harm reparation.
Hang on one second. I want to catch Jeremiah before he has to leave, if you don't mind. Pardon me, Alicia, and Tekken, if you don't mind holding a second. Jeremiah, before you leave, take another minute just to respond to the issues brought up by Victor and Elijah and Alicia so far, and thank you for hanging out an extra second or two.
Oh yeah, no problem. There's no coordination between the criminal and the civil side. I hope folks know that it would be unlawful for us to consider the criminal side and the civil side. And, a lot of folks might feel comfortable judging George Floyd's family for settling when they settled. I can't judge them for that. I'm certainly not going to tell them to wait, for anything. And so, those are some judgments that I heard, and folks, I wasn't comfortable with that. The other thing I'll say is that when it comes to economic development, and getting some opportunity along our corridors, this is work that has been slow going and slightly non-existent for a long time. But I'll say that since I've taken office, this has been a main focus, and we're actually moving pretty fast. I talked about the last time I was on your show. I talked about the Commercial Property Development Fund and how we're seeing in real time Black businesses utilizing that fund to buy buildings, right? Baldwin Square coming online, 927 coming online, right? These are folks that not only have their businesses on the north side, but they also live on the north side. A lot of people know the owners of these businesses. Renewable Energy Partners, Jamez Staples project, which was sort of caught in this development cycle for a long time. When I got into office, I worked with the city and worked with the Met Council, and we got his project unstuck. And you should go see it now. Go see the roof, and it is lined with solar panels. We're going to get young folks over north involved in this green energy field. And so, this is some of the work that we've been doing. And I look forward to sort of highlighting those projects as we continue to go on. And again, I just thank you for the opportunity to come onto the show, every Monday, and I'm always going to make it as soon as when I can. And I think that I think that there's a lot of great conversation to be had, but more importantly, I think a lot of great work has been done, and I'm excited to show my work.
Tekken, thank you, and hopefully you'll be here as often as you can on Mondays. We're going to do this every Monday because we think it's important, and we invite the candidates to speak to the community and speak to the world every week. Tekken, you're saying support East Phillips Urban Farm. Let me throw it to you. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well.
I'm going to come back to Alicia when you finish your first presentation, and then go back around the other way to have the conversation expand. But Tekken, same questions. Impressions for our community and for the world around the George Floyd murder, around the Derek Chauvin trial that is beginning as today.
So for me, having grown up in this state, being brought here as an adoptee, as an immigrant child, and growing up here, I have a different perspective of Minnesota. And so, many people in my, I was just getting a text from my neighborhood executive organization executive director, who's also a charter commissioner, and she was talking about how I woke her up late that night and told her what had happened. Same thing for our current incumbent and other people. Somehow I just was online when it hit, and kind of put out this ominous message saying, we need to buckle up. Something horrific has happened. I like to say that, George Floyd was Toto. And who we have sold ourselves to the world is like the smoking, flaming head of the Wizard of Oz. And the George Floyd catastrophe, the murder, Toto pulled that blanket back. And the truth of who we've been for all these decades was the kind of dopey professor pulling all the levers and hiding behind the curtain, pretending to be the all-powerful Wizard of Oz. We've been in some ways pretending to be this progressive beacon, right? Kind of telling the rest of the nation about equity and justice and all of this and that. And we've been exposed for the apartheid state that we are, and that we've been since our state's inception. So that's how I feel about the situation. The case, I'll be honest with you, I am trying to avoid it and remaining rather in prayer. I'm just being honest. I only hope for the sake of our state that we do the right thing. That this man who killed him, regardless of anything that people want to add to the pot, that he goes to prison, and he goes to prison for the rest of his life. I can go deep into it, but ultimately, he murdered a man in our streets. The entire world has seen this. Great shame has been brought on Minnesota, period, point blank. With regards to the 27 million, had I been on that council, I would have been a voice in the mayor's ear saying, I think we should hold back. I would have, as a person of color, as a Black man, been in communication, if possible, with the family of George Floyd to kind of say, I think, maybe, I'm not sure what other people are saying, but in the interest of full justice, maybe we should wait and see. I just feel that there needs to be, and this is why I'm running, a different voice at that table. And a voice specifically of color, a voice who is Black, and other identity issues. The number one thing, and I'll pass the ball, is that we should be very concerned about where this money is coming from, and other people had brought this up. It's also very interesting that Biden money came, I believe, right on that day, or was announced to be being released to the cities. And so other people said, well, is this $27 million from some other pot that should be going to some other, great needs, and is in turn being used, or instead being used for this. And the timing and also to trying to move the case to a different city, I feel that there was a lot of kabuki theater going on. There was a lot of trying to save face, save assets, save careers, etc. And I'm not sure that the best interests of the Floyd family was served, as well as the long-term interests of the people of Minneapolis, who, until we can maybe get a grasp on some things like other people were saying, that money is coming out of us. Can we afford? I mean, is it next time that, heaven forbid, a situation happen? Is it going to be 30 million, 32 million? Where's the money coming from? It's coming from our homeowners and our business, our local business community, and we can't afford this. So,
and what if taken? It is 150 million, and the court, a jury in the court order the city of Minneapolis or city of St. Paul to pay because it holds the city civilly responsible for loss of life or property or something like that. And so the question is, they use the term when I think Justine Diamond was killed, the settlement was going to be transformational. Is that the right word they use? And I think the thinking behind that was big enough so that the city's going to think about and encourage its employees to think about what they're doing. But then we turn around just some short time later, and here's a settlement for $27 million. And does that make the city think about it? Well, if it doesn't, will there be another event? It's like, Dr. Fauci and others are saying that the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, we see a light at the end of the tunnel right now, but everybody is saying we know there will be another pandemic.
Exactly.
So we should not rest, and we should sort of establish awareness of protocols and practices so that we're better prepared for the next one.
Well, there's been a lot.
There will be probably another shooting.
Yes,
and death like this.
There's been a lot of political, like I said, kabuki, a lot of theater going on, right? And a lot of people trying to look good in a mess that, quite frankly, they are part of making. And so, paying money, as others have said, whether it's 20, 27, that's not going to bring back a life. Actions. In 2019, I'm not sure if anyone else was there, but I was lucky enough to be able to sit in the chamber during the 2019 budget hearings, where community member after community member came to the podium asking for one or two things, which was to either fully fund and support what the chief was asking for, or to no one was even calling it defund, but to fund community response solutions. And the current council and mayor chose to do the bare minimum, which was nothing, and then walked us right into the crisis that we're facing. Then what are they called? The Powderhorn 6 or whatever it was went to the stage and called for the abolition of the police, which I believe was further abusing us as a community. That was further abuse, knowing all along that they had not the power to do it. And we saw people like backtrack left and right after that. And so I also, a long time ago in 2017, when I ran that last two months, called for truth and reconciliation. I, along with Alicia, I believe in that. But at this point, before we can even do that, we need some results. We need results. We've been doing study after study. We can have community conversation after conversation. We all know what the problems are. We all know. Many of our elders knows. Diana knows what the problems are. People who have been in this community longer than most of us know there are elders still around. And I've been here since 1994. I know. And so instead of talking, which looks cute and maybe will get us elected, instead of succumbing to more people who are not members of our community, who have just moved here to profit off of our chaos. It's time, as I say, to circle the wagons and close the gates and deal with our problems amongst those of us who have been here, who have contributed to here for more than just, the last few months or since the horrific murder of George Floyd. There are too many voices gaining power in this city who just showed up like within the week after George Floyd was murdered. And personally, I'm tired of it. And so again, I get real wound up here, and I won't exceed my time. It's time for action, less talking, less political rhetoric, and we know it's time to invest in our kids. This farm, this is a way to do it. It ties into what Jeremiah was talking about for the North Side. It's time to do both and all of the above as we look to figuring out our policing and our public safety model. It's just time.
Alicia, jump off from there. I posed the question to you: what is justice? And when you think about the civil settlement and the criminal case underway, what does justice mean? And when you think about what you're proposing about developing awareness or alternate streams for approaching the question of safety, of equity, of dignity, and then after Alicia, Elijah, then Victor. But Alicia, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think just jumping off of what Tekken was just saying, a lot of the work that needs to be done in terms of stopping the harm, because I think that's what Tekken is talking about, immediately stopping the harm. It's not sexy. It doesn't require reinventing the wheel, actually. It actually requires listening to, the Black man who is our police chief, who signed on to a list of recommendations that was published in February of 2020 that has been largely ignored. One of the things that, he's fired over 30 people since he's been chief in a very short period of time, but those keep getting overturned in our arbitration because we haven't had a system that even had a unified, a clear discipline process. There is no department in the city that should operate that way, much less our own police department. It doesn't even follow basic best practices in HR. But these are not sexy. It requires a city attorney is reviewing all of it, finding all the loopholes, closing them, will be assigned to cases so that these loopholes won't happen. We have a officer, it's a civilian review board, and I forget the exact name, that already exists. And it is under the control, the purview of the city council. And our reform community has been asking city council to strengthen that board, and they haven't done it. And this is the same group that now is turning around and offering plans that are really dividing us by trying to reinvent a wheel, instead of listening to the people who have been working on this issue for a very long time. And what people ask, well, what could this board do? They could be given subpoena powers. They could be given investigation powers. Heck, they could have been seated. They didn't even seat the board until November of last year. So there are all of these things that can and should be done that have not been done. And I really hope that people, in the city realize that we do not have to reinvent the wheel.
That's right.
I really recommend that everybody look up those solid reform ideas that are put together by law enforcement professionals and criminal justice reform professionals, people with.
And Alicia, who on the council has voted against these initiatives? That's also important.
The people largely that group of 9 that voted to abolish the police. So I want to say that, but let's do this larger issue of justice. And I don't know how it fits in, but I do want to say something about COVID parents. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I just want to say real quick, as somebody, I have been parenting full-time 2 children, elementary age children, for over a year now. My husband sent me a text. It was the first day that my children went back to school, both of them full time. He said, how does it feel to have a Monday without any kids in the house? And you know what happened? I got an email. I'm trying not to cry about this. 2 hours later, that my son has been exposed to COVID and now he's going to be home until next week. And I immediately after this, I have to go pick him up. So I want people to think about what families with young children have been going through. You know, I started running this race and somebody said, well, you know, you're going to need a babysitter. And I said, what are you talking about? There are no babysitters. We're in the middle of a, you know, global pandemic. So there are people that have been raising children, very young children. You know, I have to blow his nose, okay, for over a year. So please just show us grace in that. And, you know, it's still ongoing. So and women, you know, I mean, I think there are a lot of great parent dads that are showing up, but we know the statistics, the data shows us that women are bearing this burden even more than men. So please just show us some grace in that. And then I want to say that in my ward, there's a lot of young people who have been potting by themselves now for over a year, and we need to show grace on that too. So anybody who needs a hug when it's time, I will give it to you. So then on the question of justice, I think that what I was inching towards, and it's a word that I thought a lot about in a lot of different contexts. And I think that in the end of the day, I was thinking about it. Justice is a little bit like obscenity. You know it when you see it. You know it when you feel it. And so it requires movement. It requires a kind of integrity and wholeness on a whole lot of different levels. And so I mentioned restorative justice, but one of the things that we need, and I think this is what some of the other folks have been talking about, is economic justice. That's why I'm calling for reparations and housing very specifically, because I think that's a form of reparations that could pass judicial scrutiny here. And I actually am about to kind of launch an idea of being a pilot city for universal basic income and having a public-private partnership like they did in Stockton, California, of following, you know, a group of people for a year who were given something like $500 a month, and to see what happens. So we can be known not just as a city going through this heartache, but as a city that is experimenting with ways to bring economic justice to people who deserve it and need it. And so I think it's just this, you know, we've got to hit all of the stops. Environmental justice, what Tekken just brought up, such a lovely project. That is what we have to address too. So yeah, and you know, I was going to try to go do a tour of that this weekend, and I was talking to my 9-year-old about it, and she immediately, you know, these are the ideas that inspire us. That is where the direction that we need to go in, rather than the direction that is tearing us apart.
Thank you. Sorry to hear about your son's school. That's got to be discouraging to get started, just to get the call saying you got to pick up your son, and hopefully he's going to be safe, and hopefully those that brought the exposure will recover, and lives will be, you know, not further disrupted. But our wishes and best wishes and prayers go out to you and your family. Elijah, you brought the question up of immunity. And I'd like you to go into that, because the reason I raised the question about Judge Joe Brown's statement that what if there was a settlement that involved a cost to the city of 150 million versus 27 million, where would the money come from? And if those charges and those costs flowed to the actions of individuals, if immunity did not exist, right, where having the job required, like driving a car, that you pay for insurance, right? And if you can't get the insurance, you can't drive the car, or you can't have the job, right? Would that be something that would moderate
we have insurance for doctors,
the behavior of individual officers of the law? What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. And let me be clear, this is a federal issue, right? But you can use the bully pulpit as a city council member to start the conversation on the federal level, right? As a city council member, I can start having conversations with officials who do serve on the federal level to start this process of ending qualified immunity. This is a federal problem. Let me just be clear on that. But yes, I believe that police officers do need to have insurance. And this goes back to what Alicia was saying. Our police unions have way too much power. If they can overturn decisions by the police chief, they can reinstate police officers, right? They have way too much power right now. Our police chiefs need to have a lot more power, and right now they're trying to roll back some of this power currently. I think it was poor leadership to even start the conversation of trying to defund or abolish the police, because there are two separate situations, right? Defund versus abolish the police. I have to give acknowledgement to that. But it's poor leadership to even acknowledge that conversation in the middle of a pandemic, when we have people that aren't able to make rent. People are right now scared they're going to get evicted from their house right after the moratorium actually ends, right? Because they still are going to be back on those payments. They still have to pay that rent. People can't put food on the table. People have no daycare. As Alicia mentioned, there's no daycare right now, right? It's a pandemic. People are still being forced to go to work right now, knowing that they may contract COVID-19 and risk infecting their other family members and loved ones who may actually die from this illness. And instead of city council prioritizing the citizens and the residents, they instead prioritize defunding or abolishing the police. I think that was just poor leadership. If I was a city council member, we would have put that conversation, nipped that in the bud right away, and we would have revisited that another time, and we would address the immediate needs of our community, point blank period. We need to do something on the state level about reviewing a lot of these policies that are in place currently that are protecting bad police officers. There are bad police officers in our departments. We need to weed them out. And we need to continue to support the good police officers who want to go to work and do their job and protect and serve our communities. That's going to start with having conversations with the Minnesota Post Board, another state agency that we need to reach out to and have relationships with. Again, as a city council member, you can have those relationships with these people who sit on the Minnesota Post Board, and also state officials to do something about the amount of power that our police unions have and the review process and the policies and procedures that are currently in place with the Minnesota Post Board. Also, we need the question of housing. It's ridiculous right now that we have people spending 30%, 60% of their income on housing right now in our community, living in Class C apartment buildings. There's Class A, Class B, and Class C. A lot of the affordable housing units are Class C, meaning what? Bare minimum amenities right now. Bare minimum amenities. They're living in just rundown buildings, and we're calling that affordable housing. And also in my ward, in Ward 5, we've been taking on the brunt of affordable housing in the city. We cannot continue to do that, as we have 50% of the people that we have right now in our community living at or below the poverty line, making $30,000 or less a year. And we're taking on all the affordable housing in the city? Doing what? Creating more pockets of concentrated poverty. Affordable housing needs to be appropriately dispersed throughout the city, and other wards need to take on some of this responsibility of providing affordable housing units to people in the city of Minneapolis. And we also need to tackle the much more significant issue, which is creating livable wage jobs, not minimum wage, livable wage jobs, to help people get out of poverty and actually make it through the ranks of upward mobility. No one's prioritizing upward mobility right now, which is the ability for one person to progress from one level of the socioeconomic status to the next level of socioeconomic status. Right now, in order to do that, it's very difficult in Ward 5 in the city of Minneapolis. We have to do something with providing more livable wage jobs.
Victor, 3 minutes before we close. I'm going to throw the microphone to you.
I did a police ride along about 2 months ago. I encourage all candidates that have never been on a ride along to go on one, because I think that to be able to lead and speak into people's livelihoods, you need to walk at least a day in their shoe. And as I talked to the sergeant and officers in the 4th precinct here in my neighborhood, I did a midnight, the 5 till 2 in the morning, Friday night, and talking to the officers, African American officers, white officers, all of them. And I did a ride along last month with the EMS, and to figure out what they're going through, what they need. Right? I always like to work from the bottom up. I'm that kind of guy. I look at what that person at the bottom needs and work my way up. Most politicians, they work from the top down. They're like, I'm going to do this change, and hopefully it gets down here. But when you go and talk to these people, they're doing this work. Find out what their struggles are. Find out what they would like to see better. For example, when I went on the ride along with EMS, I said, what is that one thing you want the community to know about your kind of work? And they said, Victor, we need the community to know that what you do to one of us affects us all. Talking about MPD, Minneapolis Fire, and EMS. There was a time we all heard during the riots that the firefighters were pulled from fires. Well, guess what? That same morning, on the Thursday morning, they told me that the director told the city that if by 4 p.m. that evening that their EMSs are not secured to go to scenes, that they would pull their EMSs from the city of Minneapolis. Think about that. So when we think about what we're going to do to one group in our law enforcement or our fire or EMS, it affects us all. And guess who the people are going to suffer the most is those that are the elderly, the ones that get hurt, the heart attacks. Those are the people going to suffer. So I think that the city leadership has been chaotic. I think you're hearing that theme with all the candidates right now. It's chaotic. It's not. You don't have to reinvent. Do you know that last year everybody says that crime was up all last year? Do you know there was Newark, which was one of the cities that had major riots back in 1967? They actually had zero increase of murders. Baltimore had a 3%, but yet it's okay for Minneapolis to have a 78.3% spike. Like you don't have to reinvent the wheel, like Alicia said, but there's some basic things that you need to do that this city council has been unable to do specifically this past year, and they're just blaming someone else. They're looking for quick ways to make headlines. City council should be one of the most boring jobs in the world. You shouldn't be making national headlines every other weekend. It doesn't work like that. You're chaotic. It doesn't make sense. People, and guess who gets affected the most? The community, because they hear all these messages going this way and that way and this way, and they all get nervous. They all get. Guess what? North Minneapolis, we doubled our purchasing of guns. What does that tell you? Like the citizens can't even rely on police because they feel like there's no organization, there's no leadership, there's no coordination.
But so also too, I want to point this group, it's also time to ask more of Hennepin County and or utilize, right, yes, Hennepin County for the services that they are already 100%. Providing. You know, I mean, that's a big thing. You know, we have council members trying to maybe bring glory to themselves and their names by creating new offices and new needs when we already have these provided by other areas of local government.
100%.
And so that's something that's very important.
And that's an equity issue too, Tekken, because our county has more money.
You can start the close music in about 30 seconds. Go ahead, Alicia. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry to talk over you, Mr. Al McFarlane. No, I was just going to agree with Tekken. You know, our county, this is an equity issue. Our county has a larger tax base than we do, and we provide a lot of taxes to them. So we need to be getting some of that money back. And I've talked to people who live in this ward who have worked in county, state, and city, and they told me the county is the one that needs to be providing the actual direct services.
But there's no coordination on the city level. No coordination on the city level. No partnerships between the city and the county government.
That's right. And I agree with what Victor was saying. It should be boring. We shouldn't all be running to write op-eds for the New York Times instead of actually working to fix the situations here at home.
Listen, guys, we're out of time. This has been a wonderful and rich conversation. I enjoy each and every one of you and your ideas, and I applaud you for your enthusiasm and your intent. And I wish you all success. I hope you will join us again next Monday. I think this conversation is worth having. And I think this conversation is framing the feelings, the aspirations, and the needs of the residents, the voters in Minneapolis. So I want to encourage you to come back and bring your friends and share this conversation across your social media platforms. And let's use this as a method to enact our shared commitment to expanding civic engagement and creating the kind of community that we both want and deserve. Thanks to Diana Hawkins, and thanks to Andrew Bonoff from Hawthorne Neighborhood Council. And thank you all for listening. Share this with your friends. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane.